It was 2060, and humanity had pushed further into the cosmos than ever before. Our mission: to explore the outer reaches of our solar system and beyond, venturing closer to Alpha Centauri than any human had ever dared. I'm Dr. Samantha Reeves, lead astrophysicist on the interstellar vessel Horizon. The ship had been my home for the past 3 years, a marvel of human engineering that represented the pinnacle of our technological achievements. As I watched the stars slowly drift by, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at how far we'd come. "Enjoying the view, Sam?" a familiar voice called out behind me. I turned to see Dr. James Hoffman, our mission specialist, approaching with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. His salt and pepper hair was disheveled, as usual, and his eyes sparkled with the same enthusiasm he'd had since we first launched. "Always," I replied, accepting the offered mug with a grateful smile. "It never gets old, does it?" James chuckled, taking a sip of his own coffee. "If it ever does, I suspect we're in the wrong line of work." We stood in companionable silence for a moment, sipping our coffee and watching the stars. It was a ritual we'd developed over the years, a quiet moment of reflection before the day's work began. "So," James said eventually, breaking the silence, "any exciting plans for the day? More data analysis? Thrilling sensor calibrations?" I rolled my eyes at his playful sarcasm. "You know me too well, James. But actually, I've been working on something interesting. Remember that anomalous reading we picked up last week?" James nodded, his expression growing more serious. "The one that looked like it might be a gravitational disturbance?" "That's the one," I confirmed. "I've been running some simulations, and I think there might be more to it than we initially thought. I was hoping to go over the data with you later if you're free." "Intriguing," James mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "I'll clear my schedule. Meet you in the lab after lunch." I nodded, feeling a flutter of excitement in my chest. It was moments like these that reminded me why I'd chosen this life, why I'd left behind everything I knew to embark on this grand adventure. The thrill of discovery, the possibility of unlocking the universe's secrets. It was intoxicating. As James headed off to start his day, I finished my coffee and made my way to the ship's main laboratory. The Horizon was a floating city of science, equipped with state-of-the-art technology that would make any researcher back on Earth green with envy. The lab was already bustling with activity when I arrived. Dr. Aisha Patel, our exobiologist, was hunched over a microscope, her dark brows furrowed in concentration. Across the room, Dr. Viktor Petrov, our chief engineer, was tinkering with what looked like a dismantled sensor array. "Morning, everyone," I called out as I entered. Aisha looked up from her work, offering a warm smile. "Good morning, Samantha. How are those simulations coming along?" "Slowly, but surely," I replied, settling into my workstation. "I'm hoping to have some concrete results by the end of the day." Victor grunted a greeting without looking up from his work. The Russian engineer wasn't much for small talk, but his brilliant mind more than made up for his lack of social graces. As I immersed myself in my work, the hours slipped by unnoticed. The lab hummed with the quiet intensity of scientific pursuit, each of us lost in our own little worlds of data and discovery. It wasn't until my stomach growled loudly that I realized it was well past lunchtime. "Shit," I muttered, glancing at the time display. I'd promised to meet James, and I was already late. Hastily saving my work, I rushed out of the lab and towards the ship's mess hall. As I hurried through the corridors, I nearly collided with Captain Laura Shields, the Horizon's commanding officer. "Whoa there, Dr. Reeves," she said, steadying me with a firm hand. "Where's the fire?" "Sorry, Captain," I apologized, feeling my cheeks flush. "I lost track of time in the lab. I'm supposed to be meeting Dr. Hoffman." Captain Shields chuckled, her blue eyes twinkling with amusement. "Ah, the perils of scientific obsession. Carry on, Doctor, but try not to run anyone over on your way." I nodded sheepishly and continued on my way, albeit at a slightly more sedate pace. When I finally reached the mess hall, I found James already seated at our usual table, a half-eaten sandwich in front of him. "There you are," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "I was beginning to think you'd stood me up." Sorry, I said, grabbing a pre-packaged meal from the nearby dispenser. I got caught up in the simulations, but I think I've made some progress. James leaned forward, his interest piqued. Oh? Do tell. As I ate, I explained my findings to James. The gravitational anomaly we'd detected seemed to be fluctuating in a regular pattern, almost like a pulse. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen before, and the implications were staggering. If these readings are accurate, I concluded, we could be looking at an entirely new type of celestial phenomenon, maybe even artificial in nature. James sat back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. That's a bold claim, Sam. Are you sure about this? I shrugged, feeling a mix of excitement and uncertainty. I'm not sure of anything yet. That's why I wanted to go over it with you. I need a fresh perspective. Someone to poke holes in my theory. Well, James said with a grin, poking holes in theories is one of my specialties. Shall we head back to the lab? We spent the rest of the afternoon poring over the data, running additional simulations, and debating the possible explanations for what we were seeing. By the time we finally looked up from our work, the ship's day cycle was transitioning into evening. I hate to say it, James said, rubbing his eyes tiredly, but I think you might be onto something here, Sam. This doesn't look like any natural phenomenon I've ever encountered. I felt a thrill of vindication, tempered by a healthy dose of scientific caution. We'll need to run more tests, of course, and we should probably bring this to the captain's attention. James nodded in agreement. First thing tomorrow. For now, I think we both need a break. Dinner? We made our way back to the mess hall, our conversation drifting from work to more personal matters. James asked about my daughter back on Earth, and I felt the familiar pang of homesickness that never quite went away. Sophia's doing well, I said, smiling as I thought of my precocious 12-year-old. She sent a message last week. Apparently she's decided she wants to be an astronaut now. James chuckled. Following in her mother's footsteps, eh? You must be proud. I nodded, feeling a mix of pride and melancholy. I am, but I can't help feeling like I'm missing out on so much. She'll be a teenager by the time we get back. James reached across the table, patting my hand sympathetically. It's not easy, is it? Balancing our calling with our personal lives. No, I agreed softly. It's not. But then I look out at those stars, and I remember why we're here. The things we're discovering, the boundaries we're pushing. It's all for them. For the future. Our conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion. People were rushing towards the ship's communication center, voices raised in excitement and confusion. What the hell? James muttered, standing up to get a better look. Before we could investigate further, the ship-wide intercom crackled to life. Captain Shields' voice rang out, tense and urgent. Attention all crew members. This is not a drill. I need all senior staff to report to the bridge immediately. Repeat, all senior staff to the bridge. James and I exchanged a worried glance before hurrying out of the mess hall. As we made our way to the bridge, the ship was abuzz with speculation and nervous energy. When we arrived, we found the bridge in a state of controlled chaos. Captain Shields stood at the center, her face grave as she conferred with the communications officer. What's going on, Captain? I asked as we approached. She turned to us, her expression a mix of disbelief and concern. We've just received a transmission, she said, from Voyager 1. I felt my jaw drop. Voyager 1? But that's impossible. It's been silent for decades. I know, the captain replied, but there's no mistake. It's definitely Voyager, and it's sending us images. She gestured to the main view screen, which flickered to life with a series of grainy, distorted pictures. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The images were dark, filled with strange, twisting shapes that seemed to defy the laws of physics. What are we looking at? James asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. We're not sure, Captain Shields admitted. But based on the telemetry data, these images are coming from a star system that shouldn't exist. At least, not where Voyager is supposed to be. As we watched, the images began to resolve themselves into something more recognizable. I saw what looked like a planet, but its surface was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Vast, crystalline structures jutted from the ground, reaching towards a sky filled with swirling, multicolored clouds. "My God," I breathed, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. "This can't be real. It has to be some kind of malfunction." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The images were too detailed, too consistent to be a simple glitch. Whatever Voyager 1 had encountered out there in the depths of space, it was real, and it was utterly alien. "Dr. Reeves," Captain Shields said, turning to me, "I want you and Dr. Hoffman to head up a task force to analyze these images. Work with Dr. Patel. If there's any sign of life in these pictures, I want to know about it." I nodded, still struggling to process what I was seeing. "Yes, Captain. We'll get right on it." As James and I left the bridge, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Voyager 1, a probe launched over 80 years ago, had suddenly come back to life. Not only that, but it was sending us images of a place that by all rights shouldn't exist. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" James said quietly as we made our way back to the lab. I could only nod in agreement. Whatever we'd discovered here, whatever Voyager had found in the depths of space, it was going to rewrite our understanding of the universe. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Our team worked around the clock, analysing every pixel of the images sent by Voyager 1. We brought in experts from every field, geologists to study the strange crystalline formations, atmospheric scientists to make sense of the bizarre, swirling skies, and even linguists to examine what looked like possible artificial structures in some of the images. I barely slept, sustaining myself on a steady diet of coffee and protein bars. The excitement of the discovery warred with a growing sense of unease. There was something about these images that nagged at me, a familiarity that I couldn't quite place. It was on the 4th day of our analysis that Dr. Patel made a breakthrough. "Samantha!" she called out, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "You need to see this." I hurried over to her workstation, where she was examining one of the clearer images at an extreme magnification. "What is it, Aisha?" She pointed to a small section of the image, where one of the crystalline structures met what looked like a body of liquid. "Look closely. Do you see it?" I leaned in, squinting at the screen. At first, I saw nothing but a jumble of pixels. But then, slowly, a pattern began to emerge. It looked like writing. "Is that English?" I asked, hardly daring to believe what I was seeing. Aisha nodded, her eyes wide. "Not just English. Look at what it says." As I focused on the barely visible text, I felt my blood run cold. There, etched into the alien landscape billions of miles from Earth, were 3 simple words. "Help us, Sam." I staggered back from the screen, my mind reeling. This can't be real. It has to be some kind of trick. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The message was there, clear as day. Somehow, impossibly, there was a message meant for me on an alien world. "We need to tell the captain," I said, my voice shaky. Word of our discovery spread through the ship like wildfire. Within hours, the entire crew knew about the message and wild theories began to circulate. Some believed it was a hoax, a practical joke played by some unknown party. Others suggested more sinister explanations, government conspiracies, alien manipulations, or worse. Captain Shields called an emergency meeting of the senior staff to discuss our next steps. As we gathered in the conference room, I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. "All right, people," the captain began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "I need options. What are we dealing with here?" Dr. Petrov cleared his throat. "From an engineering perspective, the reactivation of Voyager 1 is problematic. The probe's systems should have degraded beyond use decades ago. For it to suddenly start transmitting again, let alone sending complex image data, is technically impossible. And yet, here we are, James added. The impossible seems to be happening whether we like it or not. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. There's something else, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Something I've been working on in private. All eyes turned to me, and I felt a momentary urge to shrink away from their scrutiny. But I pressed on. I've been running comparative analyses on the topography shown in the Voyager images. At first, I thought the formations looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place why. But now... I paused, hardly believing what I was about to say. I think I know where these images are from. Captain Shields leaned forward, her expression intense. Where, Dr. Reeves? I swallowed hard. Earth. Or rather, a version of Earth. One that's been drastically altered. A stunned silence fell over the room. It was James who finally broke it. Sam, that's insane. How could Voyager be sending images of Earth from the outer reaches of the solar system? I shook my head. I don't know, but the evidence is there. The underlying geological structures match known formations on Earth, just twisted, changed in ways I can't even begin to explain. Captain Shields stood up, pacing the length of the conference room. All right, let's assume for a moment that you're right, Dr. Reeves. What are the implications? Dr. Patel spoke up, her voice thoughtful. If these images are indeed of Earth, but an altered version, could we be looking at some kind of future state? Perhaps Voyager has encountered some kind of temporal anomaly. The idea hung in the air, simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Time travel had long been the stuff of science fiction, but faced with the evidence before us, it suddenly seemed all too real. There's something else, I added. The message we found. Help us, Sam. It's in my handwriting. The room erupted into chaos at this revelation. Voices overlapped as everyone tried to speak at once, theories and questions flying back and forth. Captain Shields had to shout to restore order. Enough, she bellowed, silencing the room. We're dealing with something far beyond our current understanding. But we're scientists, damn it. We don't panic in the face of the unknown. We study it. We learn from it. Now, I want every available resource devoted to understanding this phenomenon. Dr. Reeves, you'll head up the investigation. Work with Dr. Hoffman and Dr. Patel to develop a theory that explains what we're seeing. Dr. Petrov, I want you to focus on Voyager itself. Figure out how it's still functioning and if there's any way we can communicate with it directly. As the meeting broke up, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. The mystery before us was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, and I was at the center of it all. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders as I made my way back to the lab. Over the next few weeks, we threw ourselves into the work with a fervor that bordered on obsession. Sleep became a luxury as we pored over every scrap of data, every pixel of the strange images from Voyager. The more we studied, the more convinced I became that we were indeed looking at a transformed version of Earth. One evening, as I was hunched over my workstation for what felt like the 100th hour straight, James appeared at my side with a steaming mug of coffee. You look like shit, Sam, he said bluntly, though his eyes were filled with concern. I chuckled weakly, accepting the coffee gratefully. Thanks. I feel like it too. James pulled up a chair, sitting beside me. Talk to me. What's going on in that brilliant mind of yours? I sighed, rubbing my tired eyes. I don't know, James. The more I look at these images, the more certain I am that it's Earth. But, God, the implications of that. What could have happened to change our planet so drastically? And how the hell did Voyager end up there? James was quiet for a moment, contemplating. You know, he said slowly, there's a theory I've been kicking around. It's a bit out there, but given what we're dealing with... I gestured for him to continue. curious despite my exhaustion. What if, he began, Voyager didn't just travel through space, but through time as well? What if it somehow encountered a wormhole or some other spatial temporal anomaly that flung it into Earth's future? It was crazy, of course, the stuff of science fiction, and yet it would explain a lot, I admitted. The altered landscape, the advanced technology we can glimpse in some of the images. But James, if that's true, what does it mean for us? For Earth's future? He shook his head, his expression grim. I don't know, Sam, but I think we need to consider the possibility that whatever sent that message, future you, or whatever it is trying to warn us about something. The idea sat heavily between us, filling the air with an almost tangible sense of foreboding. If James was right, if Voyager had somehow pierced the veil of time itself, what horrors awaited us in Earth's future? And more importantly, could we do anything to prevent them? As the days wore on, more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Dr. Petrov made a breakthrough in understanding how Voyager was still functioning after all these years. It's been modified, he explained during one of our daily briefings. The internal systems have been completely overhauled with technology far beyond anything we currently possess. It's as if someone found Voyager and upgraded it. But who? Captain Shields asked. And why? I shared a look with James, both of us thinking the same thing. If Voyager had indeed travelled to the future, perhaps it had been found by the inhabitants of that time, possibly even future versions of ourselves, and sent back with a message. It was Dr. Patel who provided the next crucial piece of information. She had been analysing the biological data from the images, looking for any signs of life in the transformed Earth. There's definitely life there, she reported, her voice tight with excitement and fear. But it's not like anything we've ever seen before. The biological structures are so advanced, so alien. It's as if life on Earth has evolved far beyond anything we can currently imagine. As she displayed her findings on the main screen, I felt my breath catch in my throat. The life forms she had detected were barely recognizable as terrestrial. Crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with inner light, swirling clouds of what looked like living gas, entities that seemed to phase in and out of our reality like ghosts. My God, James whispered beside me. What happened to our world? The question hung in the air, unanswered and terrifying. Whatever future Voyager had glimpsed, it was one that was almost unrecognizable to us, a world transformed beyond our wildest imaginings or our darkest nightmares. As we delved deeper into the mystery, more messages began to appear in the images, always in my handwriting, always cryptic and unsettling. The singularity is coming. Beware the metamorphosis. Time is a circle. Each new message sent ripples of unease through the crew. The idea that we were receiving warnings from some future version of myself was both fascinating and deeply disturbing. What events could have led to this? What calamity was my future self trying to prevent? It was during one particularly late night in the lab, as I was poring over the latest batch of images, that I noticed something odd. A series of numbers, barely visible, etched into one of the crystalline structures. James, I called out, my voice tight with excitement. Come look at this. He hurried over, leaning in to peer at my screen. What am I looking at, Sam? I pointed to the faint sequence of digits. These numbers, they're not random. It's a date. James's eyes widened as he recognized the significance. July 15th, 2065, he read aloud. That's 5 years from now, I finished, feeling a chill run down my spine. We looked at each other, the implications hanging heavily between us. Whatever catastrophic event had led to this transformed Earth, whatever singularity or metamorphosis my future self was warning about, it was going to happen in just 5 years. The revelation sent shockwaves through the crew. Captain Shields immediately ordered us to begin preparations for an early return to Earth. If we had only 5 years to prevent whatever cataclysm awaited us, we needed every second we could get. As we began the long journey home, I found myself spending more and more time at the viewport, staring out at the stars. The beauty of space, once a source of wonder and excitement, now seemed tinged with an ominous foreboding. Somewhere out there, Voyager 1 was drifting, carrying its impossible message from a future we were now racing to prevent. One evening, as I stood lost in thought, I felt a presence beside me. It was Aisha, her usual cheerful demeanor subdued. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked softly. I sighed, not taking my eyes off the starfield. "I'm scared, Aisha," I admitted. "What if we can't stop it? What if we're hurtling towards a future we can't change?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "You know," she said finally, "in my culture, there's a belief that time is not linear, but cyclical. That all things that have happened will happen again, and all things that will happen have already occurred." I turned to look at her, intrigued despite my worry. "And what do you think that means for us? For this situation?" Aisha smiled. A small, sad thing. "I think it means that whatever is coming, whatever change awaits Earth, it's not inherently good or bad. It's simply change. The next turn of the great wheel of time." Her words stayed with me long after she had left, echoing in my mind as I continued to gaze out at the cosmos. Was she right? Was the future we had glimpsed not a catastrophe to be averted, but simply the next stage in Earth's evolution? And if so, did we have any right to try and prevent it? As we drew closer to Earth, the messages from Voyager became more frequent, more urgent. Each new image brought fresh horrors and wonders, glimpses of a world transformed beyond recognition. And always, always, that haunting message in my own handwriting. "Help us, Sam." The final week of our journey was tense, the entire crew on edge as we prepared to re-enter Earth's orbit. What would we find when we arrived? Would our world be as we left it, or would we return to find the process of transformation already underway? As we made our final approach, a hush fell over the ship. Every available screen was tuned to the external cameras, all eyes straining for that first glimpse of home. When Earth finally came into view, a collective gasp echoed through the ship. For a moment, just a moment, everything looked normal. The familiar blue marble hung in space, clouds swirling across its surface, a beacon of life in the void. But then we drew closer, and the changes became apparent. Strange, shimmering patterns danced across the atmosphere, like oil on water. And there, just visible on the night side of the planet, were faint, glowing lines. The first traces of the crystalline structures we had seen in Voyager's images. As we stared in awe and horror at our transformed home, a final message came through from Voyager. This one appeared directly on our main view screen, bypassing all our communication systems. In my handwriting, larger than life, were 4 simple words. "The future is now." And in that moment, as we hung in space above an Earth poised on the brink of an unimaginable metamorphosis, I understood. The messages, the warnings, the glimpses of a transformed future, they weren't meant to prevent what was coming. They were meant to prepare us for it. As the realization washed over me, I felt a strange sense of calm settle in my chest. Whatever was coming, whatever change awaited humanity, we would face it together. We would adapt, evolve, become something new and wonderful and terrifying. The future was now, and we were ready. As the horizon began its descent towards the changing Earth, I turned to James, Aisha, and the rest of the crew. In their eyes, I saw the same mix of fear and excitement that I felt in my own heart. "Well," I said, a small smile playing at my lips, "shall we go see what we've become?"